So, good afternoon. First year Bcom computer applications. First year Bcom computer applications semester 2 unit 2. 1 minute. Semester 2 and unit 3. Today we begin with we start with a new unit called functions, arrays and strings. So there are three so we start with the syllabus, which we begin the new unit functions, arrays and syllabus. Functions, arrays and strings. So we start with the syllabus of the course. This is a third unit. We are right now currently in third unit. So what is the third unit? Functions, arrays and strings. So functions, what do you mean by a function? Definition and declaration of functions means how to define a function and how to use functions. Basically, what is a function? What are the different parts or components of a function, or what are the elements of a function? What are the elements of a function, or how many types of functions are there? How to use functions, and how the functions are working, and function prototype, return statements. What is the return statements? Types of functions means what are the different types of functions used, formatting and unformatted functions, and built-in functions. Basically, functions are two types: user defined functions and built-in functions. Basically, functions are two types: user defined functions and built-in functions. So what are user defined functions, what are user defined functions, and what are built-in functions? Again, built-in functions are many types, like mathematical functions, string functions, character functions, date functions. And what are user defined functions? Introduction. User defined functions, what do you mean by user defined functions? Introduction, need for user defined functions, and elements of functions. What are elements of functions? Means different parts, calls, and function calls are basically two types: call by value and call by reference. What are recursive functions? So all these are basically in unit 3. There are three components. First one is functions, second one is arrays, third one is strings. So in the first function in the first part, it is the functions are over. Second is arrays. So what is an array? What is the definition of array? How to define and how to use arrays, how to create arrays, what are the different types of arrays, one dimensional array, two dimensional arrays, and how to defining an array, initializing an array, characteristics of an array, one dimensional array, two dimensional array, multi-dimensional arrays. So various programs. And the third concept is strings. So what is a string? How to create, define, use strings in C language, declaring and initializing strings, and reading and writing strings, and string standard functions, all these things. So we may discuss discuss all these things one by one here. So we start with our PPT now. So PPT. So in this PPT, and function definitions, prototypes, calling functions, and function types, all these things. So What is this? What are the objectives of this PPT? Means what is the C function? What is the, first of all, what is the definition of a function? What are the different types of functions? How to invoke functions? And what are the local variables in a function? What are the parameters used in a function? And functions, the what are the different types of functions? Means basically there are 4 types of functions are available. So function definition. So what is the function? That is the definition of a function. Means the length of your program can be reduced, it becomes easy. Functions can be called several times within your program. There are 2 types of functions. So what is the definition of a function? A function is a function is a group of statements that together perform a task. Every C program has at least one function, which is main function, and all the most trivial programs can define additional functions. We can divide up your code into separate functions. A function can be called multiple times to functions create a program. The function is also known as procedure or subroutine in other programming languages. So what is a function? A function is nothing but a set of statements. A function is nothing but a set of statements or a group of statements which are executed repeatedly. What is a function? A set of statements or a group of functions which are executed or which are repeatedly executed and called and used in a main program is called as a function. Generally every function have its a unique name unique name on it, and optionally every function have some parameters or arguments passed to it, and every function have optionally may or may not have some return types also. So what are the main advantages of functions in C language? What are the main advantages of what are the advantages of functions in C language and why we need functions? So why we need functions and what are the main advantages of using functions? There are the following advantages of using. So there are some few advantages of specific advantages of using functions. By using functions we can avoid rewriting the same logic or code again and again in a program. So the main advantage of using functions in C language is we can avoid rewriting the same code or logic or code again and again in the program. Means rewriting of the same code in multiple ways. So we can avoid the rewriting of the same code or same programs again and again in the same program. That is the first advantage. The second one is we can call C functions any number of times in a program and from any place in a program. So another main advantage of using functions in C language is we can call C functions any number of times in a program and from any place in a program. Generally, so you can call the same function within a C program any number of times, and we may use the same function or we may use the same function name or call the same function name any number of times and anywhere in the program. Anywhere in the program means program. So and third point is we can track a large C program easily when it is divided into multiple functions. So a large C program is generally divided into small functions, and these functions are called within a main program. Reusability is the main achievement of C functions. Reusability is a main achievement. Reusability means calling the same function multiple times. calling the same function multiple times or calling the same function from the main program is the main advantage. However, function calling is always a overhead in a C program. So, what are the main aspects? There are three aspects: calling and function definition. So, function aspects, there are three aspects of a C program, C functions. There are three aspects or three components or three parts or of a function calling in a C program. First one is function declarations, second one is function calling, third one is function definitions. So, function declaration and function calling and function definitions. So, generally function declaration means return type, function names. What is the syntax of a function declaration? Return type, function name and argument list. So, what is a function declaration? How to define and declare a function means return type. Generally, return type means integer, void, char, int, float, like that. Space, a function name. Some function names means name of the function, and arguments, within brackets, argument list. Argument list means generally list of arguments or list of parameters used. List of arguments or list of parameters are used, and these arguments or these parameters are generally separated by commas. These arguments and these parameters are generally separated by commas, and these values are generally passed. Generally, these values are passed on to some functions. So, function calls. Function calls means what is a function call? Function call means what are function calls? Function calls are a function. Function calls are generally means calling a function. How to call a function? So, how to call a function? Generally, how to call a function means the syntax is function name within brackets argument list. Function name within brackets argument list. Here the function name is the name of the function, and argument list is the name of the parameters or the arguments, name of the arguments or name of the parameters separated by commas. Next one is function definition. Function definition means define, how to define or how to define a function. Means function definition means what is the function definition? Return type, space, function name, argument list and function body. So, this is the syntax of the function definition. So, there are three parts or components of a functions. There are three parts or components of a functions. First one is function declarations, second one is function calling, third one is called as function definitions. So, in the function definitions, in the function declaration. So, what is the syntax of how to declare or define a function? Means return type. Return type means either it may be a return type means it returns, generally all function returns some values to a main function. Generally all functions returns some values to the main function or main program. Return type, what is the return type? Return type, it may be either return integer, it may be a void, it may be a real, or it may be a float, it may be a char or a string, like that. So, return type, space, argument list. Within the brackets argument list means parameter values or argument values. Parameter values or argument values separated by commas. Next is a function call. What is a function call? Means how to call a function. What is a function call? Means how to call a function. Generally, to call a function, we may use the following syntax. Generally, to call a function, we may use the following syntax. So, function name within brackets argument list, function name within brackets or argument or parameter list separated by commas. Third point is function definition. Third point is function definitions. Function definition, what is how to define a function, or how to define a function, means how to define a function in a C program is return type. Generally, the return type of the function means either integer, float, char, string, like that. Space function name, space argument list or parameter list, separated by commas, and within the brackets function body. So, these are the three important components of a function. So, what are the different types of functions? What are the different types of functions in C language? There are two types of functions in C programming: library functions and user defined functions. So, there are mainly two types of functions. There are mainly two types of functions in C language. First one is system defined functions. First one is system defined functions or user defined functions. System defined functions and user defined functions. System defined functions means these functions are declared in the C header files. So, these functions, generally these functions are come along with the system compilers means along with compiler only, these functions are come into the compiler, come into the language or editor. So, second, they are called as system defined. Second one is called as user defined functions. So, what are examples? What are the different examples of system defined functions? The scanf, printf, getS, puts, seal, floor, etc. Next one is user defined functions. Second one is user defined functions. So, what are user defined functions? These are the functions which are created by the C programmer so that he or she can use it many times. It reduces the complexity of a big program and optimizes the code. So, user defined functions are generally functions which are defined, which are created and used and defined by the users or the programmers itself, or the developers or the programmers itself, and so that he or she can use it many times. It reduces the complexity of a big program and optimizes the code. So, basically there are two types of functions in C language. There are two types of functions in C language. First one is system designed, system developed or system functions, and second one is user defined functions. So, system functions or system design functions are also called as library functions. Second one is user functions. So, example. So this is a simple example of example program for creating a function in C language. So, for example, this is another example. To find out the maximum of two numbers by using a function. Here max is a function. Int space max within brackets int num1 comma int num2 bracket close semicolon. So, this is the definition of a function. Here int means it returns return type. Int, what is int? Int is the return type or the return type of a function. Max is the function name. What is the max? Max is a function name, and int num1 comma int num2 are two numbers, integer numbers. Int num1 comma int num2 are two integer numbers. Here max is the function name. It is generally used to return or find out the maximum of two given integers or two given numbers. So, this is another example. This is another example program to find out the maximum of two given numbers. Here is an example to add two integers. So this is another example to find out the addition, to find out the sum or addition of two given numbers using functions, two given numbers using functions. To perform this task, we have created a user defined function add numbers. So here first we start with hash include stdio.h int add numbers int a comma int b. This is it is called as function prototype. Next int main bracket open int num1 n1 comma n2 comma sum printf enter two numbers scanf within quotes %d comma %d comma ampersand n1 comma ampersand n2 sum is equals to add numbers of n1 comma n2. This is a function call. It is called as function call. Function call is mainly used to call a function. Function call means to call a function in a C program. Printf. Printf is simply used to print the result of a program in return. This is the main program. After that, function definition. Function definition or a declaration of a function. First one is called as a function prototype or a function declaration. Next one is called as a function call. Next one is called as a function definition. As we know that in the concept of functions, there are three parts. First one is function definition, function declaration. Second one is function call. Third one is function definition. So in that, after closing after the main program, we may define all the user defined functions. So int add numbers of int a comma int b bracket open int result semicolon result is equals to a plus b return result. So this is the program to create a simple program to create functions. So we start with another PPT. So this is another PPT. In this PPT also we dealt with functions. So what are the objectives of this PPT and function definition, function prototypes, calling functions, like that. So what is the objective of this PPT is what is a function, what is a C function, what are the different types of C functions, how to invoke functions or how to call functions, local variables in a function, local variables in a C functions, parameter passing in C, and functions that do not return any values. Function definitions, the length of your program can be reduced and it becomes easy. Functions can be handled called several times within your program. There are two types of functions basically, library functions and user defined functions. Library functions are also called as system defined functions. Second one is called as user defined functions or use defined functions. So all variables declared inside a function are called as local variables and are not accessible outside the function. So basically, as we already know that in the previous classes, there are two types of variables are used, local variables and global variables. There are two types of variables are used. First one is called as local variables and global variables. What are the local variables? The variables defined and declared within a program. The variables defined and declared within a program and the variables defined and declared within a function are called as local variables. What are global variables? The variables defined and declared outside the main program. The variables which are defined and declared outside the main program are called as global variables. So what is the syntax? What is the syntax of a variable, or what is the syntax of global variables, or what is the syntax of a function? So this is the syntax of a function, declaring or defining a function. So return value type space function name within brackets parameter list and bracket open declarations and statements bracket close. So this is the definition or declaration of a function. This is the syntax of declaration of a function. So how to declare or how to define a function. So return type, generally there may be different return types used for different functions. Some functions may return integer values, some functions may return floating point values, some functions may return null values, some functions may return character values, and some functions may not return any value to the program. Why? Because they are using void. Void means void is another data type. Void is another data type which is generally used to define null return type, So some functions may not return any return types. So return type value space function name some parameters. What are parameters? Parameters are also called as argument values. They are called as parameters list or argument values list. So these parameters or arguments are generally separated by a comma. So after that bracket open, after that declarations and statements. So this is the definition of a function, syntax for definition of a function. Next, here function name is the any value name of the function. Return type, generally all functions may return some values to the main program. Data type of the result, that is default is integers. Void means indicates that the function returns nothing. Next is parameter list or argument list, also called as formal parameters. List of variables, comma separated list declares parameters. Type must be listed explicitly. So this is the declare syntax. So this is simple example of a max function. So int find max int a comma int b bracket open. If a is less than b, return b, else return a. So we will continue in the next class.